Okay. Whatever you want.
Will say so live? Yeah, you're good.
Okay, we are going to learn tonight a very unique Sicha, or at least a portion of the Sicha that the Rebbe said exactly 30 years ago. Sicha Mishpatim, Tovshin and Beis. B'chlal, it's a very big schus to learn in Yonah Gula Mashiach when we have more than a minyan. The Rebbe encouraged to learn in Yonah Gula Mashiach as it's well known. And especially when you have a minyan of Yidden that are learning together, there's a tremendous... The Sicha here, the Rebbe said, usually, just to point out over here the flow and the uniqueness of the Sicha. But that klal, when the Rebbe came Shabbos by a farbrengen. So the Rebbe started with, this Shabbos was Shabbos Mevorchim. So the Rebbe started with the Teichen of the time, that is Shabbos Mevorchim. It's Parshas Mishpatim. Somewhere later in the farbrengen, the Teichat Dvarim, the Rebbe spoke about different things that are happening in the world, current events, or in the years when the Rebbe spoke about Shleimus Haaretz or Mia Yehudi. Along the way, somewhere after the Rashi Sicha, somewhere, the Rebbe spoke about these Inyanim. This farbrengen, the Rebbe began and addressed right away the events that happened on that Erev Shabbos, and that was the whole entire focus of the farbrengen. And Adarabba, the Inyanim that the Rebbe spoke about later in the farbrengen, on the Parsha and connection to the time, was all to explain why what happened then happened specifically at this time. An unbelievable thing. Is everything okay?
What happened?
Hey guys, I'm not
Okay, so what happened on that Erev Shabbos was that there was a, whatever you want to call it, a gathering or whatever it is in the UN, where a lot of different countries got together, and Beroisham, the President of the United States, and the President of Russia, and they officially ended the Cold War, and then they began discussions regarding a, what's it called, if you help me out, a non-nuclear proliferation treaty, something like that, which they did not sign then. It took some time to negotiate the details, and it was only signed later in the summer. But they began the discussions then at that on that Erev Shabbos, and then on Shabbos, there was an additional meeting between President Bush and President Yeltsin, which the Rebbe will mention here later in one of the ha'aras of the Sicha. So the Rebbe began the farbrengen Shabbos discussing this event that happened. That's what happened at that Shabbos. That's what's unique about the Sicha. Now, b'chlal, we have a munah that everything that goes on in the world all begins with a Yid and with Torah. The very first Rashi in the Torah says that the world is created b'shvil Yisrael, b'shvil HaTorah. Whatever you see going on in the world has to be in some way for the purpose of Yidden, a result of something that Yidden did. Everything all revolves around Torah and Yisrael. That's b'chlal we have in one. In addition to that, Chazal tell us that the tzaddikim and the Talmidei Chachamim are the ones that are the foundation of everything that goes on into the world. Who are the Bainayach? Who are the builders of the world? Who keeps the kiyum of the world going every single day? The Yidden that learn Torah. The Yidden, the Talmidei Chacham that learn Torah, they are the source of the chayas of the world. So when you see any event happening in the world, you know the intuition of a Yid is that it's all for the sake of Yidden. However, how it's for the sake of Yidden, how it affects Yidden, how it revolves around Yidden is not necessarily always begoloi, open for us to see. Over the years, there were different occasions where the Rebbe discussed all kinds of things that happened, and the Rebbe pointed out what it's about and how it's connected to Yidden and so on. In this Sicha, the Rebbe very openly and directly addresses the fact that the Nasi Ader, the Mashiach Shebeder, is the cause of these incidents and is the cause of all of these things that happen in the world. I don't know if there was any other time that the Rebbe spoke in such a direct and clear language to say that this is it, that the Rebbe himself is being pale of this. There's the famous vart that the Rebbe mentioned, the Kama Pama by Farbrengens, that it says about the Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek had gemacht Tzdorim in Peterburg. That the things that were going on in Peterburg, in the capital city, so it's all a result of the things that the Rebbe in that times, the Tzemach Tzedek interceded Lamaila with the Sodom Lamaila, and he was making Zdarim in Peterburg. So, like I said, this is something that's always the fact, that's always the case, that when you see anything going on in the world, so everything comes ashpa mol maila. And the ashpa mol maila that comes into the world comes through the nasi yadir, which is the funnel of any ashpa that comes into the world to Yidden. And then from Yidden, it affects the entire world. But over here, in this Sicha, the Rebbe addresses it openly and directly. And the Rebbe connects it to the Pu'ula of the Rebbe as Mashiach, bringing the world to its completion, or what's going to happen in Yemais Mashiach. Let's see inside. Yadua, it's well known. Shekola Muroi Sheba'ilam. Everything that occurs in the world, him b'ashgacha pratis. Is of course with Hashgacha pratis. V'yesh b'hem limud v'yira b'avedis adam l'kaina. And therefore there's a lesson that we can take from what we see in Avedis Hashem. Malachas kama v'kama, and most definitely this is true, b'nigelu mu'rois, kloliyim v'ikriim, when you have such huge and central things that take place, akshurim and medinas gedolos v'chashuvis, which is related to the superpowers of the world, America and Russia at that time that came together. Shebehem nimtza roiv minyan v'roiv binyan the bnei Yisrael b'zman hagolus. In these countries, most of the Yidden are living in them. So I see that all the ha'aris here are printed only in English, right? We don't have the Hebrew ha'aris here, do we? At the end of the Sicha, we have them. Okay, we have them at the end of the Sicha. It's just I think it pays to see them. If you want to take a look later on page 61, so you have the ha'aris. So here the Rebbe says that these are the major superpowers of the world, and roiv minyan and binyan b'nei Yisrael are in these countries. So you read the Sicha inside, it seems like the Rebbe is saying it so happens to be that these are the superpowers of the world, and at the same time, it so happens to be that most of Klal Yisrael resides in these countries. But it's not that way. Take a look in the other bays in this contrast that's printed on page 61. Okay, so here the Rebbe says, it's actually an outcome of the fact that Yidden are living in these countries. That's why these countries are the superpowers of the world. And this is a quote from a maimer of the Mittler Rebbe in Teres Chaim, that it's known, any nation, any government, that the Yidden are going to live there, Begolus, in the time of Golus, these countries become very strong, they become superpowers in this case, more than any other nations in the world, as long as Yidden live there, they become greater and greater. So this is a lashon of the Maimer of the Mittler Rebbe, and then the Rebbe is mitzayin to a mechilta and b'shalach. The mechilta there says, when they get to Yitzias Mitzrayim, that as long as the Yidden were in Mitzrayim, with all the pain and suffering that Parah experienced, with all the makis, what happens after he sends the Yidden out of Mitzrayim? The b'shalach Parah Yisa'am, and then Parah changes his mind, and he wants the Yidden back into Mitzrayim. So the question that the Mefarshim ask in the Medrash, the Mechilta there addresses this question. After everything Parah experienced, he wanted more. He needs the Yidden back again. What was he missing? Shine, pat to gevarim, let him move on, and things will be good. So the Mechilta said, what happens is, when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, the entire power of Mitzrayim changed. And the Mechilta there actually explains it b'pashtus. Until that point, Parah was the Moshel B'kippah in the entire world, and he collected taxes from all the countries of the world. Once the Yidden were released from Mitzrayim, all the countries of the world said, look, here's the superpower of the world, and here's a little nation that was living in Mitzrayim, and he had no choice, he had to let them go free. So everybody stopped paying their taxes, and he realized he lost his entire power. And the Mechilta there goes on to say that if you look throughout history, it goes through different places. When the Yidden were in Mitzrayim, then they were in Ashur, then they were in Bavel, in Madai. In every place Yidden were, that country became the superpower of the world, or what the Gemara calls even a Moshel B'kippah, that the king there rules over the entire world. So that's, and the Gemara says, what's the reason for this? If Yidden have to go into Golus, so where are they going to be in Golus? Ich weiß in Uganda, or ich weiß in Guatemala, ich weiß wo. In the United States of America, the superpower of the world, in the center of everything. That's the covet of Yidden. If they don't have to, if they're not going to be in Eretz Yisrael, they shouldn't be in Golus in some fashtupta country. They're going to be in a chashuva place. Okay, let's continue inside the Sicha. So you have this event that took place with these superpowers, Bali Ashpa, Manhigus, Kol Olam Kulay, the countries that have an influence, and a leadership in the entire world. So what we can learn from these events, it's regarding something that's very important in Avodas Hashem. Same applies also regarding the events that happened over here in these days. So we're talking about what happened on this Erev Shabbos. Shaboy his asfu v'iskansu yachtov Roshim Medinas G'daylos v'chshuvas ba'olam. So these important countries, the leaders of these countries, got together on this Erev Shabbos. U'beroisham nisi eshtei matzomis hagdaylos. And leading this gathering was the two leaders of the two superpowers. And they announced that there's going to be a new relation, and then they're going to work together to bring peace in the world. They announced the end of the Cold War, and they're going to continue and intensify the work of the UN to bring peace into the world. To end the wars that there are between countries in the world, she is bategam, which will also be expressed by tzimtzum ubitul kli neshek, to reduce the kli neshek, specifically this led eventually to a treaty regarding the nuclear amount of nuclear energy that they have, or the nuclear arms, are the arsenal of nuclear that they have. The ad l'shalom v'achtos, eventually leading to a peace and unity. Shituf pula ve'ezra adodis be'medinas ha'elam l'toivus ha'nushas kula. And they're going to work together, they're going to cooperate together to bring about what's best for the entire humanity. That's what happened on this Erev Shabbos. The kaidim l'omor hazeh, before this, which was on Friday, Bashkacha Pratis, Ne'umash Nasi Medina Zu, so there was the speech that the president of the country, President Bush, then said, when was this? But early Yom Revi, it was on Tuesday night, Kame Shabbata. Tuesday night, which is a Wednesday, begins already to be the preparation for Shabbos. The 3 days before Shabbos is preparation for Shabbos. Ascholas Erev Shabbos. It's the beginning of the Erev Shabbos. Shabbai Dia v'hichriz al pu'ulaisav b'tzimtzum u'bitl kli neshek. And he announced then about disarming and about stopping to produce more of these arms. And also, sorry, missed a few words there. V'nitzul haksafim, and to use the same funds that that were used for these kli neshek, for these arms, instead of buying more arms with them, but rather it'll be used instead it'll be used for the economy of the country. And this announcement was then endorsed by Congress. That once this is something that's confirmed in Congress, so this is something that has a takeoff al pitayda, because dine the malchuse dine. Okay, makes it easier to read from here. Thank you very much. Okay, so this is what the Rebbe is talking about when to this announcement on Erev Shabbos in the UN, and also when to the speech of the president on the Wednesday or the Tuesday night before regarding this subject leading up to this gathering in the UN. Okay, that's so the Rebbe concludes. So we should reflect upon this and think about what we could learn from this. And also the details, the place where it took place, the timing of it, and also the connection to the parsha of the week, the parshas Shavua, the connection to the parsha, which is parshas Mishpatim. So here in Order 7, the Rebbe points out what I said before. It's printed there probably on page 61 or 62. So the Rebbe says, Kivin shas cholas kol onyonim u'b'teira. B'chlal, a Yid knows and believes that everything that you see happening in the world, it all has its root in Teira. It all starts in Teira first. K'may merazal, kutshu b'dichu istakl b'yraise u'baram. Rebbe looked into his Teira and created the world. Barnash ishtadl b'yraise, a Yid comes and learns Teira u'mekayim alma. Through learning Teira, you mekayim the world. U'befrat, b'chelek ha-Teira ha'shayich b'myuchad l'zman zeh parshas ha-Shavua. Especially the part of the Teira that you're reading now that's shayich to this time period, this is the source of what took place in this time in the world. By the way, this is one of the inyanim that the Rebbe said, B'negei to learning in Yana Gula Mashiach. Why it's so important to learn in Teira, the subject of Gula Mashiach. Because if we're trying to bring about a change in the world, to bring it to the time of Yemei Mashiach, where do you start? You start with learning the subject of Mashiach and Torah. When you learn this subject in Torah, so then you mamshich it. You live with it. The Rebbe spoke about living with it, and you bring it down. So this is the whole Indian over here of Yoni Gula Mashiach as well. Okay, so the Rebbe explains this now in more detail. Halimud what we could learn from this event that took place will be inyan klali ve'ikri b'avidasam shel b'nei Yisrael. It's regarding a very general and important thing that is negaya to every yid. This is really what our entire Aveda of the last 2,000 years has been all about, which is Lahavi, L'meisa Mashiach, to bring down Mashiach, L'mata Masarat Tvachim. So, what is one of the promises, one of the nevuas about Mashiach's coming, in connection to what's going to happen amongst all the nations of the world? So that the swords will be beaten they'll beat it into plowshares. And the chanisais, which are spears, I believe, right? Yeah. Will be transformed into pruning shears. And one nation will not raise a sword over the other. And they will not anymore be accustomed to fighting in war.
That was a very popular niggin in Lubavitch back in those days, the early 50s.
Okay.
Late 50s, around this.
Okay. I wasn't around then to know. Uncle Panim, the Nekuda is that when you get to Yemaisa Mashiach, there's Kama V'Kama Pratim. There's the union of Yemaisa Mashiach, which is Negeya to the Yidden, which is Negeya to the fact that when Mashiach comes, so the Yidden are going to, the Darga of Yidden is going to be Nisgala, who Yidden are. How and what their special connection that Yidden have to the Eibush is going to be revealed when Mashiach comes. And there's all kinds of psukim that speak about this. There's my Marim Chassidus that speak about this. The Mashal, there's my Marim that speak about Kol Yisrael, Yeshlam Chelek Leilam Abba, the mile of Klal Yisrael. There's the Beis HaMikdash that's going to be in his Gala Lasad Lavai. There's the Teireh Chadasha that's going to be in his Gala Lasad Lavai. And then there's the Welt, the effect that Mashiach is going to have on the world B'chlal. That's the theme of this Sicha. That's the Nekudah that the Rebbe speaks about. And over here, when we get to the events that happened on that Erev Shabbos, we see the beginning of the Pu'ula of Mashiach in the world. When we get to this inyan. L'hoisif, another detail to this is, she'inyin zeh yi al yidei pu'ulasai shel melech HaMashiach atzmai. Who's the one that's going to bring about this change in the world? That instead of using weapons, instead of fighting in wars, people will collaborate with one another and use all those money and all those funds for positive things, for in the field and so on. So this all starts with Mashiach himself. It's his pu'ul in the world. The beginning of this pasuk, what does it say in the beginning of that pasuk? That he will judge amongst the nations, and he will rebuke many nations. So who's this judge here? So the Rebbe quotes here the pshat that it says in the Radak on the pasuk. Hashayfet hu melech HaMashiach. The judge that the pasuk is speaking about is Mashiach judging. Mashiach is influencing the nations of the world. Shehei odin kol ha'amim. Mashiach is going to be the master over all the nations. V'hu yechiach lehem, and he's going to rebuke them. He'll teach them. V'yayma lemi sheyimtze b'ya'ovel yasher ha'oves. And Mashiach will say to those that have ovel, iniquity, he'll tell them, straighten out your ways. U'mipnei zeh le'tiyah mulchama beinam la'am. And it's because of the influence of Mashiach himself that there won't be any wars between one nation and another. Mashiach is going to bring peace amongst them. So therefore they'll find no need anymore to have any weapons. And therefore instead they'll use all these weapons and then turn them into plowshares. That's the pshat of the Radak. The Rebbe continues. This is all a quote from the Radak here. Shekain, and here actually the Rebbe brings psukim. This is psukim in Yeshaya that says, "Ba'achris hayomim," in the end of days, "Nochin yiyahar beis Hashem goimer." So you'll have the building of the Beis HaMikdash, v'noru elav kol hagoyim, and all the goyim are going to flock to come to the Beis HaMikdash. V'holchu amim rabim, and many nations will come. V'omer, and they'll say, "Luchu v'nale al har Hashem." Let's go up to the mountain of Hashem and see what's going on in the Beis HaMikdash. El Beis Lekei Yaakov, to the house of Lekei Yaakov, which is the Beis HaMikdash. V'yereinu midrachav, and he will teach us from his ways. Mashiach will teach them from his ways. And we'll go in his pathways. So there's a tremendous chiddush here in this pasuk that you see in the Hakafis. What do you think this pasuk is speaking about? Pashtus is speaking about the Torah, Mitzia and Teitzei Torah, and Dvar Hashem Yerushalayim. Who's it speaking to? It's speaking to the Yidden that are going to come to the Beis Hamikdash and learn Torah. But that's not what the pasuk is speaking about. The pasuk here is saying that the Goyim, the nations of the world, are going to come to the Beis Hamikdash. So you would think, what's the conclusion of the pasuk? Why are they going to come to the Beis Hamikdash? They're going to hear the whole commotion about this Beis Hamikdash that Yidden built. They're going to want to see the beauty of this beautiful structure. They're going to want to see what Yidden have. What are Yidden doing? Who are they? What are they all about? Instead, the pasuk concludes and says they're going to come to Pasha learn from Mashiach. They're going to come to learn Torah. That's what the nations of the world are coming for, to learn Torah. So obviously, what does it mean? Here the Rebbe doesn't spell it out, Barichis, but there's another Sicha in Chelik Tezvav, I believe, where the Rebbe speaks about this Barichis. And here the Rebbe says that they're going to come to learn not the Taryag Mitzvahs. They're going to come to learn the Shava Mitzvahs B'nai Noach from Mashiach. That's what Mitzvah and Teitzei Torah, Dvar Hashem Yerushalayim means. They're going to want to learn from Mashiach all the halachas that are negayah to them. Who's going to be the teacher? When it says of here, he's going to teach us from his ways. Who Melech HaMashiach? Mashiach is the one that teaches them. And the all of Nema v'shofat. So Mashiach, which teaches all the Goyim, it's the same on the other pasuk in Yeshaya where it says v'shofat ben haGoyim, that'll judge amongst the nations. Okay, so that's Nekudas Advarim over here. That all these changes that happen in the world is changes that are caused through Mashiach himself. Mashiach is the one that brings about these changes. So Mashiach is not only the one that builds the Beis Hamikdash. You look in the Rambam. So how does the Rambam describe Mashiach? Mashiach is the one that Yilchem L'chemes Hashem. He's Hoige B'Torah v'Mitzvahs Kedavid David Yilchem L'chemes Hashem, and V'Yachal Kol Yisrael Leilach L'chazik Bitka. He's going to come and bring all the Yidden to be Mekayim Torah Mitzvahs. L'cha'ira, the Rambam speaks only about the personality of Mashiach as being a person that learns Torah, is Mahadir and Mitzvahs, and brings Yidden together to be Mekayim Torah Mitzvahs. And then afterwards, when the Rambam describes Mashiach Vadai, the Rambam talks about the fact that Yivna Beis HaMikdash and Kibbutz Nitchei Yisrael. So it all talks about the effects of Mashiach when they get to Yidden, and when they get to Torah, and when they get to the Beis HaMikdash. The Rambam doesn't say, at least not right there, befeirish. The Rambam does not speak about the fact that Mashiach will bring about a change in the world. Later on, and it's the last halacha in the Rambam, everybody knows the last halacha in the Rambam. The change that will happen in the world, that the world will be madana mitzuyim ka'afar, all delicacies will be plenty like the sand of the earth. So the Rambam does speak about the fact that the entire world will change when Mashiach comes. But when you look at the Rambam, the pashtus, it would seem like the changes that happens when Mashiach comes is not related directly to Mashiach. That's not his influence. When Mashiach comes and the world is ready, so the world will change through the Eibishter, through those revelations that happen in the world. And Mashiach is Melech HaMashiach. What's Melech HaMashiach? Whose king is he? He's the king of the Yidden. He's going to be the Yidden's king, and he's going to bring the Beis HaMikdash and so on. He's going to be Mamshech, the Melucha of David HaMelech. But over here, the Rebbe is saying, at least according to the Radak in this pasuk, that the influence and the change that happens in the world is also one of the things that Mashiach himself brings about. Mashiach's inyan is also to bring about the change in the world. Let's continue inside. So since in these days, machlitim umachrizim, Roshim Medinis Ba'ilam, so these leaders of these countries in the world are made a resolution, and they're announcing this. To reduce and to stop producing more of these weapons. And instead to utilize the same funds for the economies of the world that need this. So this is none other than this is the exact fulfillment of this promise of of taking the funds that were used for weapons and using it instead for itim, for the economy. Using all these funds in order to be able to plant, and they should grow lechem, the food that people need. So this is a clear sign, And this is the beginning of the fulfillment of this promise in the coming of Mashiach through Mashiach Tzidkenu. So even before Mashiach is fully revealed, the effect and the influence of Mashiach in the world begins at this point.
So the Nevuah is a Nevuah about Yemei Mashiach.
Correct.
But they were saying that it starts even before.
That's exactly what the Rebbe was saying. And this line here, this is a very important line. It is a simon bara, and the Rebbe emphasized this. Haschalas kiyumay shel yiyudzeh. It's the beginning of the fulfillment of this promise, even before Mashiach is fully revealed. Yeah.
So according to the Rebbe, this is his Chaltas.
I don't know if you want to call it, if you want to frame it in that way. I could only say what the Rebbe said.
Is that, I'm asking, is that what he's saying?
It doesn't.
I'm saying, is that what he's saying? I'm asking.
I don't think so.
He's not saying his
I wouldn't frame it in such a way. I mean, because the Rebbe spoke so sharply against using the terminology of Schalta de Gula that
but that was back
that
was back in 48. He criticized.
Okay.
But now we're what?
We're
40 years forward.
It's the Haskalah of the
Haskalah of the fulfillment of the effect of Mashiach, the Nevuah of what Mashiach does in the world. So gradually, the Koyach and the influence of Mashiach begins to influence the world. But Haskalah de Gula, okay. Take a look in order 15. I'm not sure what order it is over there.
It's the same number.
It's just in.
It's 15. Yeah, like you said, 15.
Okay.
That's right.
Where is it? On page 61.
Yes.
So here the Rebbe says that utilizing the funds for the needs of people, that they need bread to eat. So by the Rebbe, everything is bediuk. So you would think that they're using the money, the funds for bread, for the basic needs of people. How about more than the basic needs? Maybe das nicht. So the Rebbe says no. They're using these funds not only for lechem, which is the basics, what a person needs to be able to live. This includes even eating fruits and other things which are additional pleasure. Mazmeiros is when you're pruning a tree. So they're using the funds also for trees. The Radak says it refers to vineyards or any other trees that a person is using the funds to be able to help them grow. Okay, so the point of here is that the gilui of the influence of Mashiach in the world is to bring and to funnel these funds into not only giving people what they need, begashmi is the basics, but also to give people even the tanugim of the Eibishter that there are in the world. That's what the Rebbe is adding here. Okay, let's finish the Seif Gimel, to finish this inyan. The Yes Bior, so to explain this even more, so you shouldn't have any doubts what we're talking about. The Rebbe spells it out very clearly. Kivim shenimtsoim bizman hasi, back inside the Sicha. Kivim shenimtsoim bizman hasi, the hechste Zeit. Since we are now at the peak, at a very high time, shall be as Mashiach Tzidkenu, of a time when it's the arrival of Mashiach. Hinei zeh melech HaMashiach ba. Mashiach is right around the corner and he's about to arrive. So Rayim Kvar, we could already see Me'ein Vas Cholas Pulasai Shal Melech HaMashiach Al Amim. You can see the beginning of the influence of Melech HaMashiach on the nations. Shafat Ben Agayim Vechiach Amim Ravim Vekituch Harbaisam Litim, referring to the influence of Mashiach. Al Yidei Zeh Shakadosh Baruch Hu Neisen Belev HaMalachim Du Mesailam. So the influence of Mashiach. So here the Rebbe says, you may ask, where do we see that Mashiach spoke to anybody? Mashiach said anything? Did he pick up the phone and call President Bush and tell him what to say and what to do? So the Rebbe says that this is through how the influence of Mashiach in the world comes. How? Through this, that the Eibusher puts it into the heart of these leaders amongst the Goyim, Leiv Malachim V'Sadim B'Yad Hashem. Their hearts and anything, all their decisions that they make is all in the heart, in the hands of the Eibusher. To announce so the influence of Mashiach comes in a ruchni is the geifen. That's what the Rebbe is saying here. The influence of Mashiach is to bring about that the Eibusher should come and place it into the heart of these leaders to take these steps. The reason why this decision came exactly at this time period is because this time period, as the Rebbe then said, is the hechste Zeit. It was a very high time for such a revelation and such the beginning of the effect of Mashiach in the world to take place.
So on the other hand, the leaders of Russia and America were not necessarily, or they weren't in fact even aware of the fact that they are
what,
dealing with messianic concepts.
Correct, but
Whatever
that doesn't.
they did whatever they did
Correct,
between them.
but that doesn't
who
matter
knows
though.
what
They're
reason.
not aware of anything. But
Yeah,
that's
that's
not.
right.
But that doesn't matter.
That
Correct.
doesn't
Whatever decision they make is completely beyond
No, I'm
Hashem.
saying it's they,
Okay, we'll be mamshech the Sicha and Mitzvah Hashem next week.
Yeah, on the outside, right?
and by the way, the Nebuah of Yeshaya is written outside the UN. It's called the Isaiah Wall.
The Rebbe's going to bring it later. It's all here.
They have a brings it also in the